Well, let's continue with this story and speak now to Benchmark's lead researcher, David van Wyk, who joins us via the virtual platform. David, good evening to you. I hope you were able to hear at least some of that conversation, but let's start here. An avoidance, a complete avoidance of the calamity that we saw in Stilfontein Northwest. In this instance, lots of numbers of illegal miners appearing in court. There are some who are going to come out as anticipated. Your reaction to how the police have handled this latest round of illegal mining activity?
Well, I'm glad that people came out voluntarily and that they had their day in court. But I still think that there's a serious problem, because how does an operational mine allow more than 1,000 ghost workers to operate in its mine? How did these people get underground? From where did they get underground? And how were they organized? Now, from our experience, very often people are recruited by labor brokers and subcontractors and so on. And because mines no longer employ their employees directly, they employ them through labor brokers and subcontractors, because those people pay general workers' wages rather than mine workers' wages. So the wage bill is much less, which indicates a level of exploitation that's taking place. Now, very often when people are recruited in that way in Lesotho, and we've had people in Lesotho and other countries around us to interview people over how and why do they come. Okay, first of all, those labor sending areas have very high levels of unemployment, because for 150 years, all the workers there worked in South African mines and no development took place in those places. So they come back to the mines through these labor brokers and subcontractors, often thinking that they are coming to formal jobs when in fact they don't. Yeah. And then when the cookie hits the fan, the subcontractors and the syndicates that employed them are nowhere to be seen. And so these workers who are super exploited are the ones who face the brunt of the law. And when I mean super exploited, I mean they've got no medical aid, they've got no pensions, they don't belong to unions, they've got no worker rights or anything like that. They find themselves in a mine. And very often, once they are in the mine, it's when they discover that they are there illegally. And I really think that the state needs to begin to look at how this thing is organized on the surface, not what is going on underground only. In any case, mining companies should up their security. How do you get in a formal operational mine so many people underground and they get fed and water and chronic medicine and everything else over a long period of time?
David.
And mine management is simply unaware.
David, I apologize. I have to interrupt you there, because I think it's a serious accusation that you are leveling against the mine that is running this operation at Sheba Mine. Are you suggesting that the leadership of this mine, the mine management, needs to perhaps be among these people that are arrested here to come and explain how it is that such a large group could find itself in the belly of the earth on their operations?
Exactly. I think that they failed to secure entrance points, things like ventilation shafts and so on in the surrounding area, and this is how people get underground. It's like the same thing with the Buffelsfontein mine in Stilfontein. The owners took absolutely no responsibility for what happened there. Yet those people were operating for a pretty long time underground. And so I would say that the government is failing to regulate effectively to ensure that mining companies do what is necessary to make their mine operations safe and secure. I would also say that the mining companies cut costs. You see, these are not profitable mines. They were sold to the current owners, Pan-African Resources, by the previous owners, exactly because they were no longer profitable for the previous owners. Yeah. Now, for the new owners to make them profitable, they cut costs. They cut costs in security. They cut costs in labor management. They try to cut costs in wages. They retrenched 240 workers in May this year. And thousands of workers are being retrenched in South Africa. You know, in the last 2 years, probably something like 20,000 mine workers lost their jobs. And since 1994, hundreds of thousands of mine workers lost their jobs. And so this is a country that depended on mine labor. Its wealth was built on mine labor, but mining is in steep decline in this country. Yeah. And we are not planning for a post-mining economy, nor are we planning to scale down mining to medium, small, and artisanal mining. And so we are just leaving a vacuum, and when you have a vacuum, that vacuum will be filled by chaos.
David, the continuous problem in these situations or in this activity of illegal mining is the presence of undocumented migrants that form a large part of this group of people. We've already heard that there are only 26 out of a group of 490, 26 were granted bail because these are people who could provide fixed addresses. I don't want to assume that that group of 26 are South Africans, because you may well find that others may not necessarily be South Africans. But the NPA spokesperson says to my colleague, the large grouping, Mozambicans and Zimbabweans, they are going to remain in custody because they could not, their addresses could not be verified. 3 to 4 of them are juveniles. That's another major alarming factor here, that children are being used in this. Why is it that we have continuous large groups of undocumented people that find themselves in this kind of activity? What is happening with our borders?
Well, I think there are several reasons for this. Barberton is quite close to the Mozambican border. So on that side of the country, you will find many Mozambican workers. Now, these Mozambican workers have knowledge of mining. They have experience in mining. They've been in mines before. They've been retrenched from mining. Very often when you get retrenched from mining, you don't get your pension, you don't get your severance packages and so on that is due to you, your unemployment benefits and so on, because the mining industry in this country do not pay you your severance on termination of your service. You have to apply for your pension, and you have to be able to use a computer, have internet, and so on. And if you don't have those things, you simply don't get your pension. There's billions of rands in pension funds that are unpaid. Now, the problem also is the living out allowance of mining companies. They make workers live in shacks around the mine. So when the worker his employment is severed, he becomes an illegal person in the country, an undocumented person in the country, because he no longer has a work permit. Or even if he does get back to Mozambique, he comes back again to the same mine because what was due to him wasn't paid to him on the time of termination. And then, of course, there is a case of human trafficking and so on that is taking place as well. And the syndicates exploit the vulnerability of these mine workers, and by offering them contracts and jobs on the mines in South Africa, when in fact those contracts are illegal.
Final question to you, David, and we now go to the area that you touched on, and that is that of artisanal mining. If you read every statement that is written by Makua, these are the group or the organization that is concerned with advocating for the mining associated communities. They will tell you that artisanal mining in South Africa needs to be enlarged. Not so long ago, the president of the ANC was talking, and he says, coming out of their meeting, they are punting what they're saying is industrial policy that must inform trade policy in South Africa. In a nutshell, what does the government of the day need to do to prevent the illegal mining activity from continuing, but still be inclusive in that it absorbs people into small-scale mining, if you like?
Well, I think that large-scale mining is in steep decline. We need to move towards medium, small, and artisanal mining in this country. And as benchmarks, we've worked very closely with the National Association of Artisanal Miners. We've made various recommendations to the government that went into a policy document that needs to be legislated for. So we are waiting for that legislation to take place. The government has done some training with artisanal miners already. However, you need to do an audit of all the mines and the state of the mining industry so that you know which mines are close to the end of their life, which mines are in the middle of their life, which mines are startup mines, and so on, so that you can direct people appropriately according to the industry requirements for that kind of operation. You also need to create a central buying agency to eliminate the syndicates and the people who are buying the gold illegally at the moment, because that's where the violence and the guns and the confusion comes in, and that's where the human trafficking comes in, and the people who are illegally recruiting people from neighboring states and from the Eastern Cape. So an audit, a central buying agency, and training people to have business units such as cooperatives and so on, and also creating upstream and downstream value chains in near mine communities, because you see that near mine communities actually support people that are at the moment involved in illegal mining, and that is because they generate an income for those communities when those communities have crashed when mines close down.
Final question, David. I'm letting you go. Yesterday, a very interesting comment was made by a mining engineer, and they were saying the reason artisanal mining is not catching on in South Africa is because there is no real evidence of small-scale mining that is happening in South Africa, and that's why people simply go into the illegal networks or illegal mining activity. Is that your experience as well? Is that your research? Is that what it tells you, that artisanal mining is not in practice in South Africa?
Well, I think that the problem is that South Africans have been excluded from mining. Black South Africans have been excluded from mining throughout colonialism and apartheid, because there was an agreement to put Black African labor on the farms in South Africa and then recruit foreign African labor to work in the mines. And so South Africans have got very little experience of mining, even though their ancestors did mine extensively throughout South Africa before colonialism. So that is a culture that actually needs to be revived in this country. And that is why we say we should actually create a condition where communities can team up with mine workers, be they from neighboring states or from the Eastern Cape, people with experience of mining, so that they can form joint and viable operational teams where South Africans are not excluded and where people can be reintroduced to artisanal and small-scale mining.
David van Wyk, thank you very much for your time. He is a lead researcher at the Benchmarks Foundation. Thank you indeed.